So this is what we're going to talk about today. So how many people in here have not been an event coach before? Okay, most of you. Good. Welcome to the session today. Welcome to Science Olympiad. So we're going to talk about what's success for your team. We're going to talk about your role as an event coach, the primary jobs, how to get that done, resources, where to find them, how you should be thinking differently as you go through the season, okay? And I'm interested in your feedback as well, because oftentimes I find that people have good ideas that I've never thought of. I've been an event coach. I started when my older son was in 3rd grade. He came home and said, I want to be on Science Olympiad. He's in college now. And so I got to be an event coach for a number of years. I was a head coach for an elementary school for 4 years. And now my wife's a head coach of a high school team now, and so I'm sucked into coaching events at that level as well. So this is your future, right? This is what's going to happen to you guys as you go forward, right? Science Olympiad is a great program. So let's talk about what's success for your team. So as you're trying to figure out how you want to run your particular event, this is an important question because it's going to determine, it's sort of the overriding theme of what it is you're going to do. Right? What's important to you guys? Are we just in this for fun? Is that the primary driver? If that is, and that's not bad, I'm not trying to say that's the wrong thing, that's the wrong answer. That's different than saying we want to be first, right? And depending on who your kids are and why you're doing this, that really matters, right? You want to get out of it what what you put in is what you get out, all that kind of stuff, right? So, could be we want to be number one. If you're a first-year event coach, is the first year your kids are getting into this, I'd be cautious about that. Setting the expectation with your kids that they're going to be first place on the podium up there. There's a lot of teams out there that are very competitive, that work very hard. A lot of really bright kids. It's hard to be first, right? It takes a lot of work. So I'd be cautious about that. Doing your best is in my mind, is a little bit better. The model that I try to get on is this one here. I try to figure out how to get my kids to work hard so that they'll find success, and then they say, wow, this was an activity I'd like to be involved in, and I want to come back and I want to do it again next year, right? So you as an event coach, you're a big part of making that success possible and helping them feel like they're part of something that's real. So, your primary job as an event coach is to make it simple for the kids. So, if you're doing anatomy or you're doing rocks and minerals, there's a whole bunch of stuff to learn, right? There's a long list of body parts and things that sound difficult to pronounce, whatever. So, your job for them is to figure out how to parse that down and put it into bite-sized pieces so that they can get through it and they can find success. And, there's a lot of stuff out on the internet that's not age appropriate for a 3rd grader that's anatomy related, right? So again, part of what's going on is finding resources that are going to work for kids who are elementary age. Don't underestimate them. The kids who get involved in this program are really, really, really bright. They do some amazing things. But still, you've got to find those age appropriate material. You're providing the structure. You're helping the kids either learn skills. You're going to help them build something. Maybe it has to be a cardboard catapult this year. You're making sure nobody cuts their fingers off when they're cutting cardboard. Please, I'm hoping that nobody gets cut this year. Stuff like that. Okay. So, you as an event coach, you set the example. You set the tone, right? So you're demonstrating your commitment to what's going on infuses into the kids. If you're organized, if you start practices on time, if you know what you're going to do at every session, you know what maybe you're going to do at the next session. The aura that's going to be around that is your kids are going to get it, that you're serious about being their event coach. They will take the event more seriously themselves. Okay? And so, also, that's part of the accountability equation. Right? So if you set a schedule, if you've asked them to do something, maybe you say, hey, I'd like you to take this particular material and take a look at it and study it before you come back to the next session, or something like that, something you want them to do on their own. make sure they did it. If they come back to the next session and you gave them an assignment and you never asked about it again, they will figure out that when you ask them to do something, you don't actually really mean it, right? So, follow up. Okay, execution. From a schedule standpoint, the model that I like to follow is I like to pick a time every week that we're going to practice. So, and that's not a bad model to have in terms of just sort of how an overall season goes on. Like, how much work is this? You ought to be thinking, oh, we're going to meet every week. And for elementary age kids, 90 minutes might be the high end of what they're, how long that they can sit there and have their attention span. But by the time you get organized, get together, and then just the logistics around everything, if it's much less than 90 minutes, what you're going to find out is logistics eats everything up, right? And you want to have a certain amount of time dedicated to whatever else is going on. So be sensitive to who your kids are in your team. If you got 2 third grade kids, then maybe 90 minutes is too long. You got to be thinking about what they were doing before they got to your meeting. If they've just come out of school, then they probably need to burn off a little bit of energy before they can get started. Maybe you want to plan to have a specific break time in the middle of your meeting, right? My recommendation is make that explicit, right? We're taking a break for 10 minutes, and then stick to it, right? Create that structure around what's going on, because the kids will figure out if you're serious about how the time's being used, they'll figure that out. Okay? And so I'm wandering off into discipline now. So if you say we're going to meet at 2 o'clock on Saturday, when they show up at 2 o'clock on Saturday, one of them's probably your own kid, right? I hope actually one of them's your own kid. I got into this because I wanted to coach my own kids. And when 2 o'clock rolls around, you need to be ready to start, right? So again, that's a preparation thing on your part. I had one year, I had a student who wanted to bring their friend just because we were meeting after school, and they hung out after school, and so sure enough, her friend came along and was going to hang around. I can't think of any arrangement where that's good. The friend's a distraction, and so you need to figure out how to make that stop, right? So no people hanging around. Anything that's a distraction for what you want to get done isn't going to help you. Okay? Okay, so motivation's another part of your job as an event coach. How do you keep your kids motivated? So one way is to help them understand that they're getting things done, right? So if you've set a schedule and you've broken down, you've done the planning for how the season's going to go and what you're going to accomplish, share that with them. Help them understand that, oh yeah, we're half the way through, right? And so that they can feel that sense of accomplishment and that they're being successful mid-season in terms of what's going on. Another way is to make it fun. So, and I'm probably not the best person at this. And in fact, the handout that you guys are taking today, which is also posted on the internet, this was a 2-page write-up that was done by an event coach that I had the privilege to work with when I was a head coach at an elementary team. What a great event coach this guy was. I think he did training professionally as a job, but he just brought so much energy and so much creativity to what he did with the kids. In this particular case, he was an anatomy coach, and he didn't know anything about anatomy before he got into it. But he said, wow, he approached it as sort of an adventure and then thought about what could he do with the kids that would make it interesting for them. They're not just sitting in their chair and studying something and eventually, brains turn off or whatever. And so he had he approached it with that perspective. There's other things that are in that 2-page write-up too, which I think every time I read it, I get something else out of it. He had the right perspective on what it was to be an event coach, and so that's why I wanted to share it with you. But think of ways to make it fun. If it's Zowie estimation, man, there's always something you can eat. Right at the end of the session, it's M&Ms, it's something, right? You want to be careful about giving the sugar at the beginning, but because you might lose the kids before you're all done. But there are ways to make it fun. Okay. The last thing that I like to do with kids is I like to look for opportunities to praise them in front of other people. That was my favorite way to try to motivate the kids. I looked for opportunities to, you know, I was standing in the front of the school, and the principal walks by, and the kids are there and said, I want to tell you about what these kids are doing on the event, what the great things that they're doing. In front of the kids. That's a great way to motivate them. So, finding resources. Number one, read your rules. Okay? Read your rules every 3 or 4 weeks. You'll forget what's on them. I've committed this mistake before. I've taken a team to a competition where we got to the competition, and sure enough, we broke one of the rules. It's embarrassing, and it happens because even if you're focused on your event, you're working hard on your event, by the time a month happens and you're done, or you've gotten a lot of stuff done, you forget, right? You form a different idea in your head about what the rules said. You go back and look at the rules a month later, and they don't look exactly the same as they did the first time you read them. So at least once a month, go back and read the rules. Okay, number 2, we got a lot of great stuff on our website. We've got a number of people who work hard and trying to get stuff out there, make it available for you. Our event supervisors do a great job putting together materials either to help narrow the scope of where you might be looking for information, or to maybe give you more places to go look that you might not have found things. So you're going to find both of those things. If it's not already done, probably by the end of today, you're going to find out that your event has new materials posted on the internet on our MacombSO.org website. Okay, so you ought to go out and look for those. All the stuff I'm presenting today, it's going to be available out on the internet, right? We don't present stuff and then hide it. So you're going to find anything that you see in your event coach sessions today, they're going to get posted on the internet as well. Okay? So you can ask other people for help. If you don't know who the event coach was on the event that you're coaching at your school from last year, you need to find that out. So who was that? If you don't know, ask your head coach. If your head coach doesn't know, then they should know. If they don't know, ask around. So maybe another parent on your team knows who was the coach for your event last year. Ideally, some of the things that you would do if you were behaving like you owned the event, they did for you. Maybe somebody's got a notebook that hasn't been given to you that says, here's a bunch of stuff that the last person learned and stuff the last person put together, right? So, the internet obviously is a great source. It's huge, right? So some of the jobs that the event supervisor is going to do for you, hopefully, is to keep that narrowed a little bit. But there might be resources out there that they've never seen. I wouldn't depend on your event supervisor maybe to be the only source of information, okay? You want to be careful that you don't wander off and just go off into stuff that's outside the boundaries of the event. So you do want to take some care for that. So elementary age, it's a little bit hard sometimes, but sometimes you can get the kids involved in finding information for the event. And can you figure out a way to make that fun or engaging for them, right? So it's I'll leave that up to you as to how you can make that a possibility. Let's keep going. Didn't work. Okay, here's some examples of resources that are available. And these are just ones that I found looking out there. And again, this whole presentation is on the internet. The copy, I talked about this last year, so there's already an old copy up there. Will be a brand new copy, slightly edited later today. So, don't bug me, it's a memorization event. There are 1 million bugs in the world, but your kids don't need to know them all, right? So there's a narrowing thing. There's a lot of websites out there with good information. That's, so your job is to make that manageable. How can you get the right information to the kids and get it to them in, bite-sized packages, or get, in a way that's going to be easy for them to learn it. When I coached bugs, flashcards was a great idea, right? And I tried to make it competitive for the kids. Like the 2 kids I had in the team, they loved that, right? That was the way they were wired. They wanted to be better than the other kid on being able to memorize what was on those cards. So that was a good method with them. Charged up, that's a hands-on event, right? The kids have to be able to know, they got to know some skills in addition to knowing some of the theory of electricity and circuits and things like that. They need to be able to hands-on demonstrate that they can do some things. And so there better be some wires and batteries and switches and things like that involved in what you're doing in event practices. And again, there's some interactive kinds of things online that you can find too to help augment and different ways to do things, okay? Water rockets. There's a lot of great resources out on the internet. Some of them are not appropriate for Science Olympiad. There's a lot of people who are still kids in their head, even though they're adults. They're making rockets out there and show all the cool things they're doing, but they go outside the rules of what's allowed in Science Olympiad. So make sure you're reading your rules, you understand what the scope of what we require when you're looking for those, at those resources. So I've included a few that are really good on here that will be a good place to start. Okay, stages of the season. So as you're going through the season, right now you ought to be thinking planning. How am I going to break it up? How am I going to make this work for the kids? What are the creative things we can do? It's not that you need to have all that planned out, but you need to sort of figure out how it's, you need to start to have a plan for how you're going to take this on, okay? In short order, in the next few weeks, you ought to get started with the kids, right? Before the end of January, for certain, you ought to be going, right? You ought to be meeting with the kids. And there's a period of time where you're going to be maybe learning a skill, you're going to be starting to parse down that memorization of all those bugs or something like that. You need to set aside some time at the end of the season for preparing to compete. And I want to come back to the fact that there are district tournaments that you guys are going to have opportunity to go to too. I should comment on that. But so the work, what you're doing with them as they're trying to learn a subject is different than the skills and the behaviors and maybe the activities you want to do with them when you're helping them understand how they're going to compete in that event, right? So when I'm practicing with kids, there are times when early in the season I want them both doing exactly the same thing, and sometimes I want to separate them, right? I'll say, hey, we've studied this stuff. Here, each of you take this little quiz. I want to find out what you've learned. Don't look at what each other's doing, because I need to know how each of those kids, how they're progressing, because I need to know how to help them, right? If I'm thinking about getting ready to go into competition, I'm focused on helping them understand how they're going to cooperate as a team, right? There might need to be rules about what happens when there's some uncertainty about what the right answer to a question is. How are they going to handle that? If the kids are fighting during the test, anytime I see that, I can guarantee you that's a team that's not going to do well, because it's a time killer, it's a motivational killer, it's just not a good thing. So a big part of what Science Olympiad teaches kids is how to work as a team, right? And so you need to help that process by discussing it with them. If you have expectations as an event coach, sometimes I would be keeping an eye on what was going on as the season was progressing, and I'd say, okay, Billy, this is the section I see you're really strong in. I'd like to suggest that that's the part, if you're going to, maybe it's a test you can divide and conquer. This is the part of the test that you're going to do, and Johnny, I want you to do that part. And I'd include them in that discussion somewhat, but I already have an idea of, this is how I want this to go on. Or if sometimes it's a personality issue on your team, and you may have a tough personality to manage amongst the kids. The smart kid might not be the pushy kid, right? So, sorry, that sounded really mean, but that may be true, right? So you might have to figure out how to finesse that situation and make sure that you get the most, and that they get the most out of their opportunity when they get into the room. These tests are going to be hard. So we at the tournament level we're worried about whether we get ties at the end of the day, because we don't want who's on first place and who's in second place and third and whatever only to be determined by tiebreakers. Our job is to spread the field a bit, right? And so these aren't the average experiences that these kids are getting in their everyday school. These are advanced topics that are beyond elementary. And we want to see a good distribution of kids out across these tests. So your kids are going to get into that room, they're going to be challenged, right? they're going to do their best if you figured out how to make them effective as a team. Okay. I'd like to open it up for any questions that you guys might have. If you need to go at this point, you're welcome to go. But if you have questions, I'm happy to answer those as well. Yes?